Hello.
Hello. Can you see that?
I can see you perfectly.
Now, this is my. Can you talk again?
Yes, I can see you. I can hear you.
Yeah, this is my iPad.
Can you turn the iPad? Perfect. Because right now you're full screen. Before you were just a small space in a corner.
Yeah. Yeah. You kept for some reason. Is that okay?
This is perfect. This is perfect. Right now you're perfect.
I mean, for some reason, you kept making my computer crash.
Yeah.
Well, not you personally.
No, I hope.
Whatever was going on in this thing.
Yeah.
Every now and again, it would just fucking crash. So hopefully, the iPad will be a bit more stable.
Yeah, but they will be stable. At the same time, one guy was telling me on the chat that maybe since it get crashing, the best possible course of action was to just you rebooted your computer, But this is actually better because iPads normally don't crash. So let's hope it works. Okay.
No, iPads don't. I mean, my computer's new and it's it doesn't normally crash. It's anyway.
Anyway, we're fine. We're connected. If you're drawing a side of the screen, if you want to move the iPad a bit so you're in the center, that's fine. If you don't want to touch anything, just stay where you are.
Yeah, I might go get it louder. Can you talk again?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just trying to get it loud. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, that's perfect. So
I'm not going to touch anything.
Oof, okay, so the iPad saved the day again. So
yeah, I love the iPad.
How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I am good. Yeah, if I hear that term in English, unprecedented times, or the new normal, I mean, mother of God, the amount of times I hear those expressions is really annoying. I think that people have to try to come up with a new phrase for this new situation that we all find ourselves in.
What is that? What is what you? Oh, I forgot my public service announcement that for the day, which is as usual. Wear your fucking mask. Not for you. If you want to kill yourself,
you know what?
Not you, Peter. It's not about you.
No.
It's not about you. It's about.
I was concurring with that.
It's about the people you can get injured, ill, or kill because you are not responsible and you're not using your mask. So please wear your mask for the safety of everybody else. Okay. Now, with that said, what is the thing that you miss the most, my friend? If they knock on your door now and said everything is over, everything is fine, COVID is over, what is the first thing that you could do that you cannot do now?
Oh, well, I've got a small list if that works. I think the first one is just more social interaction that's very without having to think about social distancing, without having to think about keeping your distance and the potential danger of a situation. Just that natural human connection that we make as humans, which in some ways define us as humans, that it's suddenly impossible for us. For practical things, I miss art galleries being open. Just being able to go to an art gallery at the weekend is a real miss for me because it's one of the things I really love. Go to the pub for sure. I mean, go to the pub is really nice. But I mean, I think that probably art gallery I probably miss a bit more than that. Yeah, going to restaurants. We've been to a couple of restaurants recently. We've risked it, but they've been amazingly COVID secure, and which kind of makes you feel a bit more relaxed about going there. But yeah, so I think that social interaction, pubs, art galleries.
Do you miss going to the movies at all?
Well, not so much the movies because there's so much on television, there's so, I mean, I'm not gonna give any free advertising to any of these bastards, but you know, there's so many ways of, if I want to see a movie, I kind of do that thing. Within 5 minutes, I've got it on my computer, I've got it on my television at home, and I'm watching it. For sure, it's not the same as going to the movies, and that's great, but I can still have the experience of seeing a film. Whereas, like, I've tried doing the online art gallery thing, where you go in and you look through, and they've really made an effort, and it's kind of it's great, but it's kind of the thing about going to an art gallery is so you have a personal connection or personal relationship with a piece of art, which is what makes it different from getting a really good art book with really good prints of that artwork. There is something about seeing, it's the thatness of seeing the thing, which art galleries give you, which television, online tours can never give you.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember years ago, I always tell this story. Paloma was there. First time I saw a Monet in an art gallery. Before that, you know, I saw it and was like, yeah, it's nice and all that. But I keep telling this story, and then I show it to Paloma because I went with her to the same art gallery where I saw it. That was in Paris, of course. And my experience was, the moment I saw that art, it changed me, because I couldn't move. Literally, I was staring at that painting for like literally 2 hours, just absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. And it was like, that's the time when I said, if I can, I'm never going to watch a painting again, you know, in an online or wherever. I need to see it live. It's like, you know, have you ever been in front of Guernica?
Because I was thinking, you know what? As you said that, I was thinking of Guernica. Yes, about 4 or 5 years ago, the first time I went to, what is it, Lorraine? Which museum is it in?
It's Reina Sofia.
Lorraine Sofia. And what struck me about Guernica was just how rough and ready it was, and just how, you know, bits of paper stuck on, and just how, and you just don't get that from a print.
Yes.
From a print, it looks much more finished, and so you really got, by looking at it live, you really got that sense of urgency.
Yes.
He just wanted to get this message across. He just wanted to get this stuff down. He wasn't bothered about rough edges. He wasn't bothered about, and he just cut out shapes from newspapers. And it was, I mean, and it really did bring the whole thing alive for me. And it really made it very different.
Yes.
For me. So that was really, I mean, there are some other paintings that you look at, and I don't know. I mean, like a Rothko, for example. I mean, it's stunning. It's like being in a church, you know. It just has that kind of visceral kind of a beauty and power, which you can never get from a book. And almost like that's not the job of a book, you know. But the book's, if you like, a roadmap. It's not the place itself.
Yeah, it's like watching your favorite band in concert, or you know, or listening to the studio recording. I always say the same thing, which is going to maybe sound stupid to you, but I don't like Bruce Springsteen's records, but I love Bruce Springsteen in concert.
Well, I've never seen him live. I'm sure.
But you know what I mean? It can't say Springsteen like as I could say anybody else. Like, for me, the experience is a guy that you listen it, all the strength, all the energy, all the, you know, stamina that he has in a concert. Of course, it's impossible that you get it on a record. So when you see it live, you see the real experience of how that guy is as a musician.
Maybe particularly a certain kind of music. I mean, you know, it's very about I don't know, passion, and it's about movement. Maybe I think I don't know. Seeing a classical concert, I think there's sometimes getting it's less of a immediacy to looking at it. It's like, you know, John Berger wrote quite a lot about how television has changed how we see art, because we can all look at television programs and how it's made art almost like it's almost like religious objects that you have to be close to, and it's changed our relationship. And John Berger, I think the art of seeing. I don't know if you know that book. It's got a famous book he wrote a while ago. just about how we look at paintings, and it was really interesting stuff in it. And and he talked about how like good photographs. I mean, before photographs existed, the only way you were going to see a painting was by actually going there and looking at it. And it's quite amazing, you know. It's kind of like it was the only way you could see a Monet. It's the only way you could see a Velázquez or whatever. Was to actually physically go. And since we can see all this stuff in print, we kind of know what it's about. We have a simulacrum of it in print. It's changed our relationship to the real thing. The reality of the thing has taken on a kind of a holy or holy kind of quality, because we know what it's like. We can look at we know what the Mona Lisa is like. We recognize the Mona Lisa way before we see it.
But don't you think that, you know, all those art books, as compared to, you know, being in the art gallery, they get some of the light out of the pen of the life out of the painting? I mean, I see it in a book, and I'm never, at least this is my experience with art in a gallery. It's like when I am there, I can see the brushes, I can see the intention, I can feel the life of the painter. You know, with Velázquez, as you said, they discovered that something you can't even see in the painting, which is that he kept working for like 60, 70, 80, 90, even 100 times. You see, oh, it's perfect, because he kept working on it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
He was a crazy perfectionist. And now, you know, with lasers, you know, the Prado Museum did the documentary, if you can see it, is fascinating. How he painted the girls in waiting, you know, how he kept repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. And when you know that, then you go and see the painting and appreciate even more. So I think that technology can help you. But in a way, don't you think the photographs of paintings, you know, disconnect you? That makes them look, as you said, more like an object than as real art?
Well, it flattens everything. It just makes it look like something that's perfect. Whereas I think what's interesting when you look at a painting live, you can see that, as you said, the brush marks. You can see, if you like, the idea of the artist. There's more of a connection to the artist and the hand that did it. But this is interesting stuff. And it's, I think then, I mean, Berger talked about how that then the originality of a piece then becomes very important, because it's about, because, you know, if it's not an original, if it's a copy, that copy could be exactly the same.
Yeah.
But so anyway, this is an entirely different story about copies. I'm very interested in the whole idea of copies and, you know, artificial. You know, and the extensionists talk about an artificial life, and about artificial arts, and why is one different from the other? Why?
Yeah, and as far as I know, I believe that that Da Vinci did like 3 different versions of Mona Lisa, and there's one in the Louvre, there's one in Spain, there's one in Italy, I think it is, and they are like, if you haven't seen it, it's fascinating, and you see the slight differences.
Oh yeah.
That only, you know, the art, I don't know, the spirit, the professionals and all that, they know that, but they found one in, as I said, in Prado, another one in Italy, and you are like, so he did 3 of them, and just this really, really slight differences that make him pick the one we know.
Quite funny if if the number kept growing, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
like,
that's what I
the Tate Gallery in London suddenly finds a Tate.
Yeah.
On their wall, and then in Australia they find one in MoMA in New York.
Yeah.
My God, we got them, and like and it's almost like it grows like a virus.
Yeah.
And like within a month, there's that 200 Mona Lisas around the world.
Now, to be honest, when I heard about, you know, because they said they didn't talk about them the same year. Just I think it's like 2 years apart. That somebody found it in Prado, and then somebody looked for it in Italy because they knew about the one in Prado, and they thought the other one was a fake. But then they realized it wasn't, or something like that. So I was honestly expecting what you just said. What if he shows up, you know, like 4 or 5 versions, and it turns that Da Vinci did like 10 or 12 versions of the same painting?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
and we only know one.
In his school, actually did 100 versions. I wonder if it would make them all a bit less. I mean, one of that would make the one in. The one in the Louvre. I don't know. It's kind of like how much you would have to kind of like pay to buy. I'm sure it's trillions. I'm sure it's insane. I wonder if there's 100 knocking about. If suddenly it's going to be picked up for 30 quid or something.
That would be fun. One thing, why we're talking about art and of all the possibilities that you had in life as a writer, just do novels, do theater, do plays, do write for TV, for whatever. Why did you decide to do comics? What was that pushed you to follow
I think
a career?
I think we've been talking about art. I think that's the big reason. I mean, because I was really into art, like as a kid, really into it. But also, I was really into literature, and art, comic books, just seemed a way for me to be able to fuse those two passions of mine, and so I could write stories, but I could also look at this artwork, and I could also see. It seemed a really interesting kind of a way of seeing great art. And I think a lot of comic work is great art, but also have stories. So it seems to be a way of combining my two interests, and I still see that. I still see it's the case.
And regarding the language, I keep repeating. I know, guys, I repeat it almost every day, but there's a reason for that. I keep repeating that one of the things that I love more about comics is that it's the only art that can really defy Einstein's theory of relativity, because we control time and space from the first corner of the first panel to the last corner of the last panel, meaning everything we do, everything you do as a writer, and especially with a good scenery with your artist, is to control time and space. You determine if a comic is going to be 20 pages on the same second, just move back and forth.
Sure, yeah.
So what I mean is, do you believe comics is the only art that can let you manipulate time and space with no restrictions?
Oh no, I don't think so. I mean, I think that novels can manipulate time and space. I mean, Ulysses is, what is it? It's 800 pages long or 600 pages long, and it's one day. But you could also have a story that's 60 pages long, or much less than 60 pages long, and it covers an entire life. So that is a manipulation of time and space for sure. I mean, seeing Ulysses, it's one day. It's a really, really long book, but it's one day in one city, in one small part of the world. But you can, it's so. I think that, I mean, I think perhaps that's one of the things that all arts, whether it's comics or fine art or novels or films, it is about controlling time and space. It's about what time and space does, and it's about what your characters do within time and space.
And then the second part of the question is, what do you think makes the comics language so special, on different and unique compared to the others?
Well, the comics language, it is unique. I think that I best answer that by I was talking to someone once about horror, which is why I often don't think that comics do horror great, because they do a thing which is kind of called horror, but it's not actually horror. It's never actually scary. In the same way as a novel or as a film can be scary, and that is about time and control. In a movie, what makes the horror scary is that you have no control over time as an audience. The time is going ahead. It's whatever the director and the actors are doing, it's doing not of your own volition. You're not turning a page. It's happening before you, and you can't control it, and you're trapped in that world. And so that's why that's scary. The reason why novels can be scary is because of imagination. You can't. I mean, now you can control the page for sure, so you control that bit of time, but because it can kind of withhold information, the horror comes in those places that it doesn't quite describe, or it comes in your imagination. With comics, you don't control it. The reader controls the time, actually, because he or she controls how quickly they turn over the page, how slowly they read. So you can't have those kind of scares, those kind of spooks. But and there's also a problem about withholding information, visual information, because you're seeing it. You're seeing this stuff. So I think that, I guess you could do horror, make it something really scary in comics, but you'd have to really work hard to show stuff, but keep a lot of stuff back, so the audience is still having to use their imagination. So you only ever see something out the corner of the page. You never quite see. I mean, in fact, as I talk, I'm blowing my own theory in Skywide. So as I talk, I'm thinking maybe you could do horror in comics. You just don't see it very often. I think often horror is seen as gore in comics.
Yeah.
And comics do gore really well, but that's not horror. That's not really scary.
No, slasher and gore for me. That's not horror. That's just gore or slashers. That's completely different. For me, horror, I always say, I still remember the movie that scared me the most in my life is Boris Karloff's the movie, the Mummy. And Boris Karloff's the Mummy. Yeah, I saw it when 8-year-old soul maybe, and I still remember, the drapes, the bandages, just moving behind him on the floor, and that's the only thing you could see. You see the bandages moving, and that scared me to death. That same way I always say about Alien when I saw it when I was maybe 10 years old. It scared me to death because it didn't show me. It suggested.
It's really true, and it's why the other ones aren't as good, because these creatures are dragged into the light too much, and you get almost familiarized with them, and they cease to have their potency. I mean, a movie that I saw again recently was Don't Look Now. It was a terrific movie of fantastic actors, Donald Sutherland, Julie Christie, really great actors, and of course in Venice was a kind of another actor in there, but it was just the creepiness of it was so amazing. Seeing this red figure running in the distance, so there's that hint of the supernatural, but it's never quite clear what it is.
Yeah,
and then obviously the ending was amazing. That little dwarf creature. Now, I had a discussion with my wife recently, and she was saying that killer dwarf at the end is a man, and I always saw that killer dwarf as a shrunken old woman dwarf. I always saw it as a woman. So I don't know. What do you think, man or woman? The dwarf in Don't Look Now.
Yeah, I honestly haven't given any thought about man or woman.
No, it's not something that keeps you awake at night.
Yeah, I didn't care about the gender or the identity. If you ask me now, I could say a man.
Really?
If you ask me now, I could say a man.
Huh. Maybe I'm wrong.
Not who knows? When everything when it's open to interpretation, as we just said.
I always saw that.
For example, when we were talking about comics in language and horror, I had this same discussion with Scott McCloud last week, and we both agreed that comics is an amazing language for horror, exactly because of what you just said, which is that it's completely open to the imagination of the reader. And we were discussing, the typical thing. You just show this, a guy with a knife, or just a knife on the arm. And then you just put there a sound effect. You go black, and then you just complete.
Yeah, but I think
having the reader complete with his imagination what you put in there. So it's horror, but it's always open. That depends on you as a creator. If you want to leave it more open, less open, show more, show a drip of blood, or just the knife and the sound.
That can work. That can be horrific, but I think that comics has to work hard to be really scary. Whereas novels, it's because there's so much you can't see in a novel, and it's really a drip feed, depending on what the writer wants to tell you. And in films, it's about time. Film, so a man starts to walk towards the door, and you think, please don't go through that door. We know what's behind that door.
Yeah.
That man keeps on walking, and and you're just watching it. You're helpless to watch to stop that person. In a novel or in a comic, well, you can stop that person by not turning that page, but by not reading on it. You can go make a cup of tea and get over your shock, and then return to that line. By which time it's all dissipated. But in a novel, in a film, you can't.
Then, but we're talking about horror and comics and your own work. Then, do you consider your work in Hellblazer as horror or not?
No, I think there are some horrific things in it. There were some horrible things in it, but I never quite saw it as horror.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's what counts for horror
Yeah.
in comics, which is demons and black magic and dirty stuff. That's what counts for horror. But I'm not quite sure if it is horror.
No, but that's why I'm asking you about how did you see it, because for me it wasn't horror. As Paul Jenkins wasn't horror. As I think maybe the only one that was really horror was Jamie at the beginning, and that's mostly about the horror was mostly about the society behind the Thatcher things. All that he tried to reflect behind it than Constantine himself. But in yours, I thought more about poetry. I thought more about I was reading a play in a way that involved
Well, thank you. I mean,
mysticism, magic, blah blah blah. But I didn't think it was a horror comic, if you know what I mean.
no, I was also more interested in Constantine as the character and his relationships with some of the people around him, and just trying to kind of with something like Hellblazer, when it's had a history of runs by really good writers, and it's always had a few different iterations. You have to obviously try to make this character your own, but at the same time make him feel like Constantine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one reason why the comic lasted, and one reason why it worked and it still felt true, was that we as humans, over a period of time, we show different facets of ourselves, and I think that we're not just one simple block of personality. It's much more nuanced and multifaceted than that. And I think there's a kind of there's a core that remains the same, and I think there has to be a core of John Constantine that remains the same. But with time, with experience, with age, stuff changes, and I think that's why it worked with Constantine. Like my Constantine was very different from, say, Jamie's or Garth's.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they were still the same person.
Yeah,
thought the same person because there was a core or a heart.
But don't you think your vision of him was? Did you try to make him that? This is just my opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, of course. Did you think? You tried to make him more mature? Like time had passed since the start of the run, so he got older, of course, which reflected, and he got to be more mature, or he didn't get mature at all with age.
I'm not sure if a mature was the word I'd use. I think I wanted to put situations in his way which he hadn't done before, like relationships, and change, rather than maturity. The fact that dealing with change, dealing with what happens when different things happen in your life, and looking at him change a little bit, as we all change a little bit over time, due to experience, due to life, due to age, due to maturity sometimes. Though, actually, I haven't met many people who actually mature in a kind of a psychological sense. Every now and again, what people kind of like who are kind of crazy kids change a little bit, but mostly, I think that people just remain kind of infantile in older bodies, or so I don't quite. And I totally include myself in all this.
Oh, I include myself too.
Good.
I just look older. I am the same idiot, or even evolved to become a bigger idiot. So, in your writing, what do you think that is more when you start to to develop an idea for a comic? First, another question: when you write, do you need absolute silence, or you work with music around?
Silence.
Or music, radio, whatever. Or just...
No radio, no silence. Sorry, no radio, no music, silence.
During the whole process?
During absolutely the whole process.
Yeah, because I was asking because some people tells me that at the beginning they go silent, when they're developing the ideas and the structure. And then, when it's more like a automatic writing in a way, they just have, a podcast or music behind to see, to keep the cacophony around. That's why I was curious to see what's your
If that's what works for them, cool. But for me
in
personally,
your case, you need the silence.
yeah, well, that's that one. I can't see the points. I mean, I want to be hearing my own voice,
Absolutely.
and I
Yeah.
want to be hearing the voice of the characters. I don't want someone else's vision. I don't want someone else's voice, someone else's sound.
Yeah, entering your head. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's all different ways of doing this stuff.
Mhm.
I think Kafka said, silence can't be silent enough. And he was someone that, I'm not comparing myself with Kafka, of course, but he was someone in terms of when he was doing his writing, that the silence can't be silent enough. And I'm kind of with him on that.
Yeah, I perfectly.
That said, traffic outside, that kind of stuff, I don't care about that.
Mhm.
Because that's kind of it's organic and it's natural,
Yeah.
and it's not a human voice trying to get inside my head.
Yeah, that's the same for me. I need the cacophony, as you just said. This.
Yeah, I've got no problem.
I don't care about the sound of birds chirping or cars in the street. It's just something that I'm so used to. I have an anecdote about that, by the way, just so you see how it was.
You good what?
An anecdote about that.
Oh,
When
really?
until I was 25, I was living in my hometown, and we live like 2 minutes away from the docks, literally from the fishing docks. So all my life, I didn't realize until Paloma came there for the first time. Every night, birds, sparrows, or whatever you say in English, they were there because they were going to the fishing docks to eat, to try and steal some.
Where was this? Bilbao, I think.
In Galicia, in La Coruña, in my hometown.
Okay.
But we live literally 2 minutes away from the fishing docks. So of course, every time there was birds, there were sparrows trying to go on there and steal the fish and all that, and I never noticed because I was born there, and that's all my life.
It was just part of the
So Paloma
background.
came there for the first time, and literally she couldn't sleep for a week. So it was like the birds are making noise; they don't stop. You know how noisy sparrows are and all that,
Yeah.
and I can't sleep at all. And that's the first time in 25 years I realized the noise.
Yeah. Well, I think you get blind, you get kind of deaf to.
Yeah, because
It
that
becomes
I
part of
grew up.
the
I grew up with it, so it was the moment I lost it for a while when I moved. I had problems sleeping because I didn't realize I missed the noise.
I mean, sometimes with a notebook, maybe sitting in a pub, having a pint of beer, or in a cafe with a coffee and a notebook and scribbling down ideas or scribbling down. I wouldn't actually be doing the writing. I wouldn't actually be doing the stuff, but I might be mapping out stuff. I might be mapping out ideas, or I might be developing ideas. I can quite like that sense of being in the middle of a thing going around, of like, and their voices. I'm not actually listening to what people say.
Absolutely,
it's stuff that's
it's just cacophony, right?
Yeah, so that's fine. Yeah, but I don't really want this in my study when I'm working.
Yeah, and
That'd be weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And do your characters argue back at you? They tell you, Act One, not this literally, but you know what I mean. Oh, Act One is fine. Act Two is fine. You know what? I couldn't do that. What you're trying to make me do on Act Three, this is not me. This.
Well, I don't know about quite that, but sometimes you map out the story for yourself, and you map it out what's happening, and the story out, and the character through lines. And sometimes in the writing, it is true, the character might almost start to say something slightly different, and it's really hard to, and that point of creation where the character does something different from how what you planned for it, and there is a kind of, I guess this is what you're saying. It's like you've got the best laid plans for this character, and at that moment you realize actually this isn't what the character wants or do. So I guess there isn't, in a sense, the character are starting to, and that's great when that happens. I mean, because the structure that you map out for yourself is just a map, or it's routes. But one can make lots of detours, and one can make lots of kind of changes along that route.
Mm-hmm.
generally, as long as you're headed in the right direction. But yeah, and when things can change, and that change, I think, is a really important part of the creative process. I think that making yourself open to that change, whilst at the same time having the structure. If it's all change, then you're not changing from anything.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing about working out a kind of structure of what you're going to be doing, because then you do have something to change. You do have something to work away from.
And that takes me to another thing just pop in my head. What is more important for you when you're writing or developing an idea, to be more precise, the journey or the destination?
Well, developing an idea, when at the early stages, I try not to be too wrapped up with what happens with plot. I tend to just spend some time thinking about theme and the idea behind it. What is this about? What is this saying? What am I saying with this? Why am I wanting to write this? So it's just been much more about theme. What is it about? Characters that can explore, which would be useful to explore those things.
Yeah.
What is this character about? And what's interesting, David, is that quite often when you do develop the themes and you develop the characters and their issues, interesting scenes and interesting plot points start to develop from the themes. That's when it's really working well, because those plot points and those things that happen, which come from thinking about the character or come from thinking about the theme, they're always the stronger ones because they're embedded in meaning. Otherwise, you just have lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it becomes like a soap opera. This happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And it doesn't necessarily have intrinsic meaning.
But yeah, so when you're working that way, you just said, I'm curious about, do you focus on the structure a lot, or do you focus on the emotional side of each character that will push the story where it should be?
Starts off with themes, emotions, meaning. That's the first thing. When I've got that, when I think I know what it's about, when I think I know what the themes are, when I think I've got this stuff, then usually I've got a bunch of scenes which I think I really want this. I really want, somehow this is important. I might not be quite sure where it's going to fit. Then I start to think about structure. Then I start to think about mapping it out. And this is the kind of rough way it's going to go. I tend to want to then have an idea of how it's going to end up. Because otherwise, because that gives you something to work towards.
Yeah.
Because again, that gives meaning to everything that comes before it. That can change, and everything is always kind of quite fluid. But before I start, if it's a 5-part comic series, say, I would want to have mapped out the beginning, what the characters want, the setup, if you will, and then where we're headed, where it's going to be at the end, and then once you know where you are at the end, you can allow your characters to wander off a little bit, as long as you're getting them slowly towards the end. What sometimes happens is you realise that actually that isn't the end, and the end happens before then, or the end has to happen after then. I mean, or the ending is no longer right. So I think you've always got to be quite open and fluid.
Have you ever had have you ever been forced or forced yourself in a situation where it's gotta be that ending, but you have to force the plot so that ending happens? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's not a great situation, and I think that probably when you have to do that, you've either got the wrong ending, or you've got the wrong characters to make that ending happen. I mean, the ending deserves a certain kind of preamble, if you like, a certain kind of story to make the ending have meaning. I mean, but having the ending, I mean, a lot of people say to me, "I've got a good idea for a story," and I don't think it is necessarily a good idea. They've got a setup, An idea seems to be, when they talk about what happens at the beginning,
Mhm.
well, I could give you, I could give you 10 minutes. I could give you 10 interesting opening scenes or opening setups. But I'm interested in what's going on behind the story. What's it about, and where is it going to end up? Because the ending defines, if you like, what you've been reading.
Mm-hmm. That's what I mean before. Go, please go.
No, I think that's it. I've got nothing more interesting to say on the matter.
That's why as I was coming back to my former question about the journey or the destination, because in some cases I've seen writers who sacrifice everything to the destination, meaning to the ending, and then you see they have forced it, so that ending happens, and you're like, no, I see the first act works, I see the ending works, but everything in the middle, the knot or the second act, doesn't work because it's obvious that you try to force it to happen instead of adapting, as you just said. Okay, if it's not the right way, maybe I should change the ending. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that can happen, and it's difficult, and it's an easy trap to fall into, I think. And probably I've fallen into that trap myself at times. But I mean, I think that it's important, I think, to be open and fluid.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not necessarily that the ending is wrong,
mm-hmm.
It could just be that how you got to that ending is wrong, and that could be, the characters you've got aren't right for that ending. If you love that ending, well, then be brutal. Start with that ending, work out what that ending means,
Mm-hmm.
and then work out what's the best way, the most interesting, dramatically powerful way, and emotionally satisfying way for me to get to this ending,
Mm-hmm.
rather than beginning at the beginning and saying, I'd love to get over there, and that's where I want to get to. It's kind of the wrong way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think you're really giving yourself headaches.
Yeah, it's not in summarization could be, don't force the ending, be fluid with it, and if you want to make it happen, work to find the best way to get there, right? Instead of just
if the ending's the most important thing for you, if you think that this is the one thing that's great about this story, what an ending! Not to a twist. I don't care about the twist, but what a great ending. Well, then you have that ending,
mm-hmm.
but you design your story to effectively get to that ending,
mm-hmm.
and you've got to be brutal about it. That might mean you lose a character. That might mean a character changes. That might mean this lovely scene you've got, which you really, really kind of got attached to, you get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help you get to that ending effectively?
Yeah. Peter, can you move a bit to your left?
Yeah, I'm kind of sliding across, aren't I?
Yeah, because people is telling me that you are, cutting your head sometimes when you tilt. That's fine. That's perfect.
Yeah, I'm kind of
That's perfect.
I'm doing that a bit.
No. That's okay? Perfect. Yep, absolutely. What I forgot to ask you this before. Do you remember the comics you grew up with? The ones you grew up reading?
Well, you know what? Kind of a confession.
Okay, I'm not your priest, so
I didn't really grow up reading many comics. I was not a comic book nut when I grew up. I was a kid that loved reading books,
mm-hmm.
and I actually, from an early age, I loved art, and they were my passions. And I didn't come to comics until quite late, and
mm-hmm.
I think that helps me. I think it's easier to be a bit of an iconoclast if those images didn't have the same meaning to you from when you were a kid. And I think that so I never really I saw them, I picked them up, I picked up Batman, and maybe there were some kiddies comics that I had. I remember knocking around, I guess Dandy and those kind of things, but they were just stuff, it wasn't really anything, but I wasn't one of those kids that kind of loved his comic books.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it was,
Yeah, it's just really fun to see, when you ask American writers, most of them have, grown up reading Superman, blah, 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 Batman, whatever, superheroes. But every time I ask one of you Brits, it's a completely different answer. You have so different backgrounds in terms of what you read. For example, I remember asking Garth a month ago, And he was like, no, the only thing I wrote as a kid, because of the really bad distribution we had outside of Belfast, was Commandos. And I think that's a small comic books about
I
war.
remember them. I remember some of the covers on those Commando books were just amazing.
Yeah, and he's like, what? That's why I keep coming back to war stories. People is like surprised, and it's like, some of the people grew up. Go ahead, sorry.
I just thought it's because Garth is really violent and he likes violence.
It's possible, but he kept telling me, for other people were superheroes, for me it was the war comics. That's what I grew up with. So of course,
it was the what?
The war comics.
Oh yeah.
So that's the influence. In Grant's case, he's the most similar to you. Grant was telling me the other day the same thing. He didn't grow up reading comics, but comics let him have a voice. In terms of, this is the stories I want to tell, and I can do it in comics. So that's the direction I'm going.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it showed that us British writers. We can talk about the British invasion, but also and afterwards. But I think that generally the kind of British guys that went over to America and wrote for America, that our influences were not necessarily or usually at all comic books. They're much more likely to be politics or literature or art. And I think that's where we were drawing our influences from. And I think that was reflected in the kind of work we were doing. Yeah. I think that's why it seemed a bit revolutionary.
Absolutely.
But to us, it didn't seem revolutionary at all. It just seemed to be, well, of course. I mean, there's all this world of great stuff out there to be influenced by, to draw from. And that's what we were doing, I think. And I think that's why there seemed to be a distinctive voice, even though all our voices were really very different.
That's what I was going to say, that they're in person and as writers, there couldn't be four guys more different than you, Jamie, Neil, and Grant.
Completely different.
As not only as writers, also as person, as talking to you, the influences everybody has is in their lives. It's completely different. Jamie's about politics. You are about we were talking about art, about plays. Neil was a completely different experience based on his childhood. Etc. Etc.
Yeah.
So it's not only about the writing. It's about the things that made you want to be a writer, right?
Things that make you want to write, and also things you draw from that well of experience and well of stuff that you draw from when you think about what stories can be. And I think that's why perhaps we were able to look at comics with a sort of a clean eye about. You can do an awful lot of stories with our comic books that aren't necessarily superhero comics. We can do this. Why not tell stories about absolutely fucking anything in comics? And why not? There's nothing inherent in the medium that means there can only be these kind of stories.
Yeah.
But perhaps if you've grown up reading this stuff and you defined yourself by these kind of comics, which is generally superhero comics, perhaps it is harder for them to think, well, actually, I could do a story about a lame kid who kind of like wants to, I could do a story about a kid with thalidomide, or whatever, I mean, you can just draw on so many different aspects of the cultural landscape.
Absolutely. And it's also about, again, with Scott McCloud last week, we were saying the thing that we love the most about comics is that every time somebody tells you there's a limit, somebody comes like 10 minutes later and breaks it or bends it, or like there's no limit to what we can do in comics. So it's like, okay, you tell me I can't do that, give me 5 minutes, hold my beer.
Well, absolutely. Well, it's like you never talk. What's interesting is with novels, you never think it. What's into it, comic books and theme of story are often intermingled. So to a lot of people, comic books means a certain kind of story, but you'd never kind of like apply that to novels. You'd never apply that to films, because we know that a novel is not a type of story. A novel is a means by which to tell any story you want. And I think that because of the audience expectation, I think that for a lot of comic book companies, it is a certain kind of story with certain kind of characters, usually dressed up and usually with secret identities and all. Now, I think there's nothing wrong with superhero comics. And I think that you can use them to tell some really interesting stories because they are part of our fabric. And also superhero comic books is the only medium that actually does superheroes well. And so why not use superheroes, which is specifically comic book style of storytelling? But why not use them? But that can be used to talk about anything you want, even if you restrict yourselves to guys with secret identities and spandex suits. That can still talk about rape. You still talk about politics. You can still talk about racism. You can talk about anything you want.
Yeah, that's exactly your case with X4, X-Statix, and whenever it comes out, X-Cellent, right? Is that you use the superhero background to tell stories about anything you wanted to tell, right?
Yeah, and the one thing I wasn't interested in was how tough they were, who they could beat up, or I wasn't really interested in their powers, except when their powers were an extension of the kind of characters they had. I was much more interested in this group of people who were just like so many people I was seeing on television, who were obsessed by being famous and being stars. That's what they wanted. That's the only thing that existed. And that was much more important than the kind of people that were up against fighting or the supervillain. And I wasn't really interested in that stuff at all. It was just about their all internal games and their lives and their squalid kind of affairs. And that's the stuff that kind of appealed to me. So that was, it was, and I think that's what made it quite real. And also why quite a few people responded to it positively, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was just, many people doesn't know this, Peter knows, I was the original translator when X4 and Statix was published in Spain. I was the translator of that book. And I kept reading, I don't know if you remember, it's been many years ago, but I remember the first time I read it, your X-Force, when I was translated, I kept thinking, these kids are like a super, like a football team. And meaning like famous, really young, famous people who's not aware of reality. They just live in a bubble. And then the bubble of
fame and riches comes quick and probably a bit too earlier than they're able to deal with it and cope with it. Football team, or a kind of strange celebrity obsessed America's Got Talent version of a superhero team.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I was talking about in terms of what I was seeing going on in society. At the same time, having fun with these characters.
You work a lot with Axel, of course, at Marvel, Vertigo, and all that. And so I have to ask about your new book with him, which is American Ronin, which is done by Ako, the Spanish artist.
Yeah, Echo is amazing. I don't know how well you know Alex, but probably quite well. But Echo, the artwork. First of all, it's called American Ronin. It's a story that's set in the very near future, or maybe just a slightly reimagined present, because a lot of stuff that's going on there is just like an extension or a slight exaggeration of the processes that are happening there now. And it's set in a world where there are no national boundaries, and democracies are kind of there, democracies by name alone, and the real power resides in these huge multinational mega cores or pan cores, and that's where the raw power resides. And these kind of groups have names like Lincoln's Eye and Ghost of Hiroshima, War and Peace. There's all different parts around the world, and they each have these struggle among themselves for supremacy, and they all have kind of these Ronins, who tend to be human beings who have been kind of manipulated to some degree and then these Ronins kind of fight each other.
Mhm.
And our story, this first storyline, follows the American Ronin, who
Mhm.
works, or rather did work for Lincoln's Eye, and recently, for a reason which will only slowly reveal, he decided not to work for them anymore as a kind of assassin, and he decides instead to track down everyone in this group who did these things to him to make him what he is, which is the American Ronin. And his, if you like, his skill set, or his, in inverted commas, power, is that he has incredibly advanced powers of empathy, and there's some kind of nanotechnology in his brain. So, but to access, say, what's going on in you, to really have a deep empathic connection with you, I need to get some of your DNA. So, like, you know, so you eat in a restaurant and you use some chopsticks or a knife and fork. I can go and take a swab of that DNA. I download it, I put it in a process, I inject it, it hits there's parts of my brain that have been manipulated, and then I really, really, really feel what you're feeling. I really get you, and I can predict what you're going to do, and because of that, I have a great. It's a way of which I can understand what you're going to do, and as if you're an enemy or if you're an assassin's target, it means I can kind of better kill you.
Go.
But that also comes with. So what I'm interested in, that also comes with problems. I suppose what the theme is. Yes, he can use empathy to really to kill his targets, but when the empathy is so close, when the empathy is so great, and that he feels a lot about this target, he's also in some ways killing bits of himself every time he kills the target. So that's the kind of thematic story, but it's told in the guise of like a James Bond-esque adventure story. So there's lots of fighting, there's lots of very cool stuff, and some really good characters, and it looks amazing. Echo, yeah, I think it's how you pronounce it, isn't it?
Echo, yeah.
Echo, yeah, kind of. He's done a fantastic job. It makes it look. It just looks very modern and very different, and in a kind of a fractured way of telling the story. Really suits the Ronin's own kind of fractured kind of grasp of reality. And we learn more about him the deeper we go into it, because what I'm interested in is the character and the characters of the people he tries to kill. They're not just cardboard cutout targets.
Yeah.
They're also kind of people I really try to get deep in, because he has to go deep into them. So,
yeah, I was going to ask, because you just said, oh, by the way, Akko told me to, he cannot be live here today because he's busy, but he told me to ask you how you think Tottenham is going to do next year.
He did say. I'm not a fan of Mourinho. I think his day is past. He's not right for Tottenham. I mean, Tottenham are known for beautiful failure, like playing great football, playing wonderfully, but usually not quite being tough enough to win. And at least you got the beauty. Now, I think that with Mourinho, I think we're going to fail, but it's going to be ugly.
Yeah. With him, it's always ugly. Even if you win, imagine if you lose.
Yeah, but think about Mourinho. The only way you can put up with the way he plays is if you're winning stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think Spurs will win stuff because they just don't have the money. They just don't spend the money. I mean, next to they've got a really big, fantastic ground. I mean, we've got the best ground in the country, maybe even Europe. It's an amazing new ground. Really cost a lot of money, but it was predicated in terms of paying off the debt that was generated. One thing that our chairman was going to do was to have American football played there, and we had like deals with American football franchises to come and play one of the games of the National Football League in America in London. But of course, that's not happening now.
Nope.
And so all this stuff, and there's no, so I think that we won't be spending any money, and I think that there's too many kind of holes in the team.
Yeah.
I think that Harry Kane one of our few really good players. I think he'll stay there another year. I think. And then if there isn't more progress, I think he'll go to, I don't know, Real Madrid or Manchester United or, you know.
Yeah,
something.
next year everybody knows that Real Madrid is either getting Mbappe or Harry Kane. One of them, you know, when they finish their contract, they're waiting for them. It's like, yeah, we don't need to rush. One more year, you know, one of them will come. So
yeah. Well, I hope you get Mbappe.
I hope you keep Harry Kane too.
Yeah,
but I also hope you lose Mourinho, because I think firing I forgot the name of
Pochettino.
Yeah, Pochettino. I think firing Pochettino was a big mistake. I'm sorry.
I agree. I'd rather stuck with him, even if we ended up mid-table this year.
Yeah.
I think it was a rash decision. We were playing really bad, but I think he needed some money. I think he needed help.
Yeah.
But sometimes you go through those periods. I think they should have shown some faith in him. I mean, it's not going to happen. But if there's a chance of Mourinho walking out and Pochettino coming back, I'd love that. It'd be great.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go back to comics. People are going to kill us.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
This is you and me talking about audience. Let's go back. So with American Ronin, you were saying the part that I found more interesting is, yes, of course, the Bond, the technology, blah, blah, blah. But it's not the part that interested me the more what you just said. The part that got me more interested on the book is what you just said about having to kill a target that you get so empathic with that it kills a part of yourself, in a way. So is that the real part that interested you the most? The empathy?
For sure. And it's not just his targets who he makes connections with, because sometimes he might need to find out about that target, so he uses techniques. Sometimes there's empathy techniques, and sometimes it's this DNA to get under the skin of people. So it really is a story about someone who gets under the skin of people and understands people. So it really is about people, and I think that's and what that does to him as a person, as his own sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
When you're continually getting so deep into other people's selves and lives, and so I think that the story itself obviously spends a lot of time delving into that really interesting theme of empathy, of who am I, if my edges start to dissolve because I'm connected to so many people that I start to, I start to think like them. Where do I begin and the other person begins? Where do I stop and the other person begins? So
that's what I was going to ask too, because that has two sides. It could, I am not asking for spoilers, don't worry about that, but it could dehumanize him because he needs to disconnect from so many inputs, or the other way around, since he's so connected to so many people, it gives him the humanity he was lacking.
Well, I mean,
there's a dichotomy there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really that's what really intrigues me about the setup. Is that it is someone who has this skill to do this thing, but the toll it takes on his life, and now he does try to get away from it. He does have some secrets that are slowly revealed, which perhaps tell us how he manages to cope with this process that he goes through. So anyway, I think it's a really good story. I think that when you get to read it, you really see how kind of like it's just not just a shoot 'em up. It has all that explosions, it has all that stuff, but actually it's about stuff that's much more deep and much more interesting and much more about character and much more about who is this person and who are other people and our connections to other people. So I think
that's why I was asking about that side of it, because I think that people is going to see when they read it, as they always see it on your writing, at least myself, and I think most people does. You just need to scratch a bit, and you'll see what's really behind the
I hope so. I hope so. This is certainly one of those stories, I think.
Absolutely. So let's go with people's questions, okay?
Yeah.
I don't think that we were not ignoring you guys. We just have technical problems and we're fine now. So, okay, Javier Merino says, hello, everybody. I read Kid Lobotomy a short time ago. I wanted to ask Peter, how did he have the idea, and how it was it to be able to put it on a script?
I thought the question was going to be, what the fuck was it about?
Well, it's a polite way to ask. I think
It's not. It wasn't so much the idea. It was more about the things that interested me or obsessed me. Actually, the little spark that began it all, Shelley Bonds, dropped me an email. I hadn't spoken to her for a while, and she dropped me an email, and the headline was it was headed "Hey Lobotomy," and it was just a piece of mild, offensive talk that she didn't sort of dish out, and it was just, I looked at that word again, lobotomy, and for some reason I made the connection between that and Franz Kafka, and bizarre as it is, and I had this little beetle, plastic beetle on my desk. I kept looking at this and thinking about one of my favourite Franz Kafka stories. In fact, one of the great short stories, Metamorphosis, Die Verwandlung in German, and which I loved. I loved that story, and I love the image of the person, changing into this creature and the reaction to the people around him. So really, I just wanted to do this story about. I want to do an homage, if you like, to Franz Kafka and Metamorphosis, but told in this hotel, because I also quite like stories set in those kind of hotels. It's such a kind of a confined, it's such a confined world in which to tell the stories. The Shining. And there's been some really great movies like set in hotels. So really, it wasn't just an idea that started it. It was more a couple of ideas, a couple of obsessions: lobotomy, Beetle, Kafka, Metamorphosis, and the story kind of grew from there. And I wrote the story quite differently from how I would normally write the story. I really let the story flow without any idea, particularly of where it was going to end up. I wanted those themes and those obsessions and these characters to lead me by the hand through this hotel. And so I did kind of write it slightly differently from how I'd normally write it, which is why it seems perhaps even weirder than my usual stuff. I just wanted the characters and the situation to lead me along this kind of merry dance through this hotel. And yeah, so that's how it all came about.
Okay. Let me see. Angel Perez says, Mr. Milligan, what could you tell us about Britannia, which is quite unique inside the Valiant universe? Was it your idea, or this was something that the company asked you to do? And how is it to work with the great Juanjo Rip on that title?
First of all, it was 100% very much completely my idea. And the reason why is what I was interested in. When you live in England or in Britain, you're very aware of the Roman past, and there's even a road that's still called the Roman Road. So you're very aware. So you can still see some of the ruins from Rome. So you're very aware of the Roman past in this country, and maybe you are in Spain as well.
Yeah, but we have, in fact, we have a way that is called El Camino Romano, which is literally the Roman way. Literally the same.
Yeah. So I was really I've always been quite interested in the classical world, particularly Greece, but Rome also. So the Romans' time in England always fascinated me, and I wanted to do a story based on the Romans in Britain, but also based on I really was interested in the difference between. The classical world is really interesting. You read some of the stories, you look at some of the art, and it seems very close to us. The people seem very close to us. But you dig a bit deeper, and sometimes you realize just how different they were, and some of the things which were seen as normal back then we're just so at odds with our own way of looking at the world. And I wanted to explore that a little bit by having this hero who comes to detective, who, if you like, was a slight outlier in that world, if you like, whose way of looking at the world was perhaps slightly more akin to our way of looking at the world. So I wanted him to almost be like us, wandering through this strange Roman classical world with the strange beliefs and the strange, ideas of what should happen to the body after it's been killed, and attitude towards slaves. I mean, our hero has a slave. He's offered him his freedom, but one person said, "Did you think that was controversial?" I said, "Wouldn't no, because slavery was part of the classical world.
Yeah,
I mean, it's part of many worlds, but it's completely part of the classical world." And it's interesting. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. It's such an interesting fact. It's interesting the Romans' attitude towards slavery. They had slaves, but actually they weren't racist. What's quite interesting is once you served amount of time as a slave, or once you'd be given a slave, you became a free person of our Rome. You could be from Britain, you could be from Hungary, you could be from Spain, you could be from Africa, black, white, yellow. You were a citizen of Rome.
Yeah,
with full citizens' rights. So slavery, we often think of, because in our time, in our recent time, slavery is so tied up with imperialism and so tied up with racism. The Romans had slaves, but they weren't racist. I mean, they were pretty rotten in many ways, and they were fairly kind of a fairly brutal kind of society. And but they weren't racist, and I always thought it was quite interesting. So I wanted to kind of get that into slightly.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to try and explain to people that kind of thing that you just said. Like one thing is slavery, another thing is racism. One thing is how it was in classic Greece, in classic Rome. One thing is the imperialism. When they traded slaves, brought them from Africa, etc., like completely different eras with two completely different points of view, right?
Yeah, I mean, I forget the second half of this guy's question. It was, I think the first one was about, was it my idea? So I've said yes, but in a really long-winded way.
Yeah.
And the second part was,
how was it to work with Juan Jorrip on the book?
Well, great. I mean, I think Juan did the first book. So if he set the marker for what it was. I met Juan, I think once or twice. And it was great to meet him because he's a real firecracker of energy and that guy.
I remember you guys in Madrid, and he was like the firecracker.
Yeah, he is, though, isn't he? Yeah, his artwork is amazing, and I think that the story is amazing. But a lot of the success of the book comes from the combination of the story, the words, and this amazing art that really brought ancient Rome and ancient Britain to life. So yeah, it was great working with him because I didn't have much interaction with Juan face to face, but it was terrific because you could write a script and you just know that this guy's going to pull it off. You just know that this guy's going to really interpret it in a fantastic way that really makes you confident about writing the story. It makes you kind of up for it,
Okay, let me see. Felipe Gonzalez says, "Hi, Mr. Milligan. It's an honor to have you here. Identity is one of your main themes in your work. Internal, social, public, sexual. It is a unique feature you have as an author, as a creator. What is the reason that leads you to explore those themes?"
Well, I think the simple answer is, what is there more important to write about? Who are we? Who am I? What makes me me? What makes you you? It seems to me they're basic, fundamental human questions. And I think it's obviously a completely human question. I mean, and I think maybe it's a very modern human question. I think that perhaps these questions would have been very different, maybe even in Roman times, but very much before then. I think that the idea of me as an individual, social animal, I think that that's the thing that would interest me. What makes me me? What makes you you? And yeah, that's the interesting stuff.
La Berenjena Atómica, the Atomic Aubergine, believe it or not, that's his nickname on the screen. Would it be possible for Peter to talk a bit about his work on Shade the Changing Man for Vertigo, please?
Yeah.
Let's be less generic. Let me narrow the question a bit. How did it come about? How was the proposal? Were you expecting to have going in there? Well, how was it for you?
Well, Karen Berger wanted me to write something for a new series, and she said, "Have you seen Shade the Changing Man?" I thought, no. I think it was we wanted me to write something, and we looked at some existing properties they had because we thought there might be an interesting way of going of me really taking to something that existed, but there was kind of a bit more abundant that no one really cared about anymore, so I could do whatever I wanted to. Let's cover the laws of comic books. The reason why I could get away with so much in X-Force is that I wasn't dealing with any characters that had any great kind of like brand profile, so I could pretty much do what I wanted with them. And the same with Shade the Changing Man. You know, it was this little story, this crazy little story by this crazy creator called Ditko, who I always thought was fantastic. You know, when I did start to read comics, he was one of the characters I thought was all individual voice, and it's kind of sometimes you can think, how is he getting work? I mean, how are they allowing him to do this stuff? You know, it's so personal and individual, which I loved. So so we started off with Karen and me wanted me to write a series. So then I kind of had this book called Shade the Changing Man, which I wanted to change, and I know I wanted it to be completely different. I wanted just to have just that name, just that character. But I thought the story itself, as Ditko had all these elements, was insane. You know, I mean, I guess it had no more shape or sense to it. And so I then wanted my story to be about something that really meant a lot to me. And one thing that was happening to me at that time was that I was going over to America a bit for the first time, and I was talking to Americans quite a bit. So I wanted it to be about that. I wanted it to be about my relationship or my understanding of this huge, amazing, scary, insane, but brilliant country called America. And so it was the story, if you like, Shade the Changing Man, in a way became like a postcard, an affectionate postcard to an insane, violent cousin who you kind of like, but scares the hell out of you at the same time. So once we decided to do Shade the Changing Man, I needed to focus on what it was to be about. I knew I wanted it to be about America. And I wanted characters that could tell that story. So I spent about 6 weeks traveling across America, just a Greyhound bus, stopping off at kind of out of the way kind of places in America with a notebook, thinking about Shade the Changing Man, talking to Americans, using a few characters. There was a girl I met in Texas, actually, who are kind of based Kathy Dukes on a little bit. So that, you know, and Lenny was like an amalgam of a few people I kind of talk to. Because interesting about traveling by Greyhound, when you travel by plane, it's a very impersonal kind of way of traveling. You have your own seat, you sit there, and that's it. When you travel by a Greyhound, not only do you see a different kind of America, a kind of often America that can't afford it, that doesn't want to fly, so it tends to be slightly more from the lower orders, or younger people, or people with not so much money. You also get to talk to people a lot more. You get to chat to a lot of people. I mean, I've got a memory of myself, this white student, and this black guy standing outside of somewhere in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Midwest, I think, when we had to change Greyhound buses, sharing a joint. I was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, looking up the stars while we waited for a Greyhound bus to come. You don't get that in airports. You don't get it on airplanes.
No.
So I did this journey across America, a lot of that stuff. Then I ended up in San Francisco, and I went to Haight Ashbury, and I looked at that stuff, and I tried to get a flavour of what was happening all those years before, and I came away with that, with the whole idea of what I wanted the story to be about, the kind of stations of the cross, if you like, of the story going through it, and the kind of characters that went into it. So the story's about my relationship with America, its heart, and the characters that help me tell that story.
Let me see. Mateo Carmona says, I want to ask Mr. Milligan if X-Cellent is going to be an ongoing series or a limited one. And also if you have any problems to fit it with Jonathan Hickman's Dawn of X.
Well, I've not had any issues with Jonathan Hickman's idea of the X-Men. I've never actually worried about the X-Men world when writing either X-Statix or the X-Cellent. We've always seen us in our own little bubble of reality. That so I never ever worry about continuity. I never ever worry about any of that stuff. If occasionally I tread on a toe and I kind of say something which is contravening some kind of holy law of Marvel, of the continuity, sure, I'll change it. But I can hardly ever remember that happening because my guys existing in their own little bubble. So that's been no problem. The initial storyline is 10 episodes. And so we're going to do that. And like everything else, we'll see. After that, we'll see whether we want to do any more, whether they want us to do any more. But the first storyline is going to be 10 episodes.
Okay.
We've been working diligently away at it. And the artwork is great. And it's the X-Cellent is like a darker kind of X-Statix. It has slightly fewer of the gags and the lightheartedness and the bubblegum of our X-Statix, because the X-Cellent are a darker kind of team. X-Cellent are in the book; they're a big part of the book. But the book is called The X-Cellent, and it's about the X-Cellent, this other team, almost like an anti-X-Cellent, almost like an anti-X-Statix team. But I won't go into detail because there'll be a spoiler alert. But some characters from the past who you might not realise come back and have joined the X-Cellent. So it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of really deep stuff in there, and there's a lot of interesting stuff. And Mike Allred's artwork is terrific as always, and he's clearly having a lot of fun. And the story's really coming on. It's going really good. At the moment, 10 episodes is planned.
Okay.
When it's going to come out, who knows anything anymore?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Every time I see online somebody asks you, I am tempted to answer saying, who the hell knows? We are where we are. It's like, we don't know what's going to happen in 2 hours. How can we know,
Yeah, I know. I mean, Dark Horse, Karen Berger's line at Dark Horse, are putting out a new version of Enigma, brought together in a really deluxe kind of copy of the book, and that was meant to be really soon coming out, and we had parties lined up in San Francisco to celebrate it, all this stuff lined up. But of course, look, that stuff goes out the window. But there are worse things that have happened than Enigma not being published in autumn. So a lot worse things have happened. Yeah,
it'll happen eventually, guys. Just be patient. But consider this a good thing because more work is being done, advanced, and all that. So maybe you will get it faster. We don't know. Marvel is they would maybe do a month or something like that. We just don't know. It's Marvel.
Yeah, but Enigma Deluxe version will come out. X-Statix will come out. And all that's all you can say.
Yeah, well, hopefully sooner than later, but in this world, we don't know. And that's it. Log from Howard takes us to the other side of the X-Cellent, which is the origin. How did you come up with that crazy thing called X-Force and Statix? Did Joe Quesada suggest something to you to do the book, or how did it come about?
Hold on, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, he says, Hi, Peter. How did you come up with that crazy thing called X-Force or Statix? Did Joe Quesada suggest you to do something like that book, or how was it?
No, all your viewers seem to think that I get my ideas from someone else's idea. This is not true. They're my ideas. No. Look, I think Axel said, "Do you want to kind of do something with X-Force?" But of course, I'm not interested in Gambit. I'm not interested in these characters. Fine though they might be, and they have their place, But it's not my place.
Yeah, I don't see you interested in writing Cable's stories.
Well, it's just yeah. I mean, Cable. I'm sure Cable's fantastic if you like that kind of stuff, but I don't like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was show, and no one will be happy. So I guess even back then, I had this idea of breaking down this team and turning this team into something else. But I knew I wanted the book to be kind of self-referential or postmodern, and if I want to kind of change the team, I wanted to change the team within the remit or the story of the teams. I wanted to kill them all off.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted, and I knew I wanted to do a book about the stuff we talked about what I saw was a more current trend in America of fame for fame's sake, for celebrity. Suddenly you get these people who are celebrities, and of what? I mean, and it's not interesting, quite new. Obviously, this book is 50 years old, but then it was very new. Idea that being a celebrity, you don't have to be a celebrity because you are anything. It's just there is a thing called to celebrity almost, and that really interested me. And I figured that that's what these guys would be. And I wanted their powers aren't that great. And I also thought about X-Force as this kind of poor cousin of the X-Men kind of universe. It's kind of none of these guys are that great. None of them would really make it in one of the really big books, So there's stuff to the X-Force. So I thought, well, let's take that further and let's think about these. Let's create a book of let's make a superhero team of those kind of characters who aren't those big hitting fantastic. Let's make all their powers pretty low level. Their powers really aren't that great, but what they're great at is being celebrities. What they're fantastic at is being superstars. So let's pull that further. So where would they live? Well, of course, they live in Los Angeles. They live in Los Angeles with the other stars. They live in Bel Air. So they drive limousines. So it was then it just wrote itself. Then you get a bunch of characters that tell that story.
As a side note, I don't think the viewers mean that you get your ideas from the publishers. I think they mean if you were approached by them to do the book, or you approached them to do it.
It wasn't so much Joe; it was more Axel. I mean, I find that in this business, I think that I personally find it's really important. Your relationship with the editor you're working for is really important, and so I always try to work with editors that I like and trust whose opinion I trust and whose point of view I trust. And I just like dig working with, and Axel was definitely one of those people.
Yeah, for you, it's always been Karen, Shelley, and Axel in a way, right?
Yeah, and now Warren Simons.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Warren has body and bad idea. Yeah,
I mean Warren is fantastic, and there's some other ones. I'm hoping to be working with in the near future, who are some new relationships. But I'm hoping that they would also turn out to be a good editorial writer and relationships. Yeah, to me, it's really important. So Axel, I forget exactly. I mean, I think Axel was talking to me about doing a story for him. He was at Marvel, doing something, and he talked about this thing called X-Force. And I think that I forget the exact way it worked, but it was something like, "There's this thing called X-Force. Do you want to do a little thing with her?" So it's almost like because no one cares about them too much, you kind of got a free hand. And I thought, great, I can get rid of these fuckers and tell the story I want to tell. Yeah. How do I tell the story I want to tell? And So the whole process of X-Force and those characters I created, and then killing off those characters, and then starting fresh, that was the process.
Yeah.
What was interesting is we did get some letters in from X-Force diehards, lovers, really, really pissed off the way I'd kind of besmirched the fine name of X-Force. I'd sullied it. Well, of course,
but I'm sure you expected it, right?
yeah, I mean, I mean, fair enough. If they really like X-Force, fair enough. But this is a different X-Force.
Yeah, absolutely.
And get over it.
Yeah, that's life. Or just go and buy another book. Nobody forces you to read it.
Really, yeah.
Let's see. Mr. Milligan and Angel Perez asks, could you tell us why did you leave Justice League Dark? For me, it was the best series in all the New 52. And your work with Michael Hanning was astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, thank you. And yeah, Michael is fantastic. I think he's great. And I think maybe we had different visions and different of the kind of stories that we want to tell. I think that perhaps I wasn't quite I think I wanted to go slightly more Vertigo-ish, and I think that I wasn't quite the big bold action stuff which I think they wanted a bit more of. So I think that it was a kind of an amicable separation, which I think which suited both of us. So I think I thought I was getting just forced to write the story in a way that I wasn't really happy about writing it. So I think sometimes it happens, it breaks up, and sometimes it's best. I mean, I didn't want to be, I'm not a kind of a straight down the middle superhero comic book writer, and I know that they would say that that's not what they want in Dark Horse. But I think I think they thought I wasn't quite writing the book they wanted, and I kind of felt I was writing the book I wanted. So
irreconcilable differences in amicable ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it, but also that's what happens, and it's cool. It's better this way.
Yeah, I think it's better to leave when both sides realize maybe you're not the right guy, or maybe this is not what they want, than staying there and getting everybody angry. Both of sides really angry, like 6 months later, right?
One of the most important things you do when working with an editor or producer is to make sure that you're both trying to produce the same book.
Yeah.
And I think that if you don't do that, and you're both, and I've been in situations where I've felt it a bit, where you both have slightly different ideas of what this book should be, it's just heartache. It is this non-stop kind of struggle because no one's satisfied. Because I think so. You have to have the same vision of what you want this book to be.
Yeah, and it's not going to be push back from both sides, right? At all.
So otherwise, there's no point doing it because.
Okay. Let me see. Francisco Sanchez asks, does it cause you to change from jobs like Shade or Enigma to more normal things like X-Men or Elektra? How do you change your frame of mind to do those different kind of books?
Well, I think probably quite badly, actually. I think that I find it difficult. I think, and perhaps they were perhaps ill-advised that I did that. I mean, I think that I'm sometimes asked, are there any stories in your past that you'd like to revisit and rewrite and have another go at? I always thought that Elektra is one of those. I thought that she's a really great character, and I really like all that Greek stuff. And I think it's fantastic. But I think that, again, I think that and actually it really ties in with what we're just talking about. When I first, the first ideas I had for Elektra, which which seemed to be going okay, and then they seemed to like the first script and the first thoughts were much more, if you like my kind of stuff, darker and weirder and more Vertigo. I think then there was a big change at Marvel. I think there was kind of one of their Night of the Long Knives happened, and things changed quite a bit. And I think the attitude towards the book changed, and they wanted the book to be much more a straight down the middle superhero action movie kind of comic book, and which I think I tried to do it for a little bit, but of course then your heart isn't in it. It wasn't the book you really wanted to write.
Yeah.
And so I think that would have been better if I hadn't at that point I'd pulled away. But you know, but there you go. You learn, you make these mistakes and you learn, you know.
Yeah, and then, you know, when editors change, you know, sometimes the direction changes, and you were the perfect fit, and then you're not because the new editor wants something different, right?
Yeah, but that happens in TV as well. It happens to all different stuff. David, how many more do we have?
Whatever you want. If you need to leave, we'll cut now. If you want to stay more, whatever is good
I
for
need
you.
to leave in like 5 minutes.
Okay, so one last question you want?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do one question, and then I'm sorry, guys, but this guy is, as I always say, with live things. This is life. Life is more important, and they need to come back to life. That's it. Ignacio Jose, hi Peter, greetings from Chile. I met you in Sasan Comics. If your Constantine had lived long enough to know about the death of Margaret Thatcher, what would he have done?
Well, I think Gemma Delano's Constantine would have gone out and got drunk.
Celebration.
I would kind of want to take a slightly more counterintuitive way, that perhaps he would have mourned her in some way. But you could actually make a story out of that. You could actually make a story that somehow she was this demon, but actually, but perhaps was working for good. So there might be a story of going, what everyone would expect.
Yeah.
He would be really happy. She's a terrible person, and he'd be really happy. So one little part of me thinks that in that case, I'd like to write a story where there isn't the case.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he mourning Margaret Thatcher?
Mm-hmm.
And start with that. I don't know why, but that seems to me a much more interesting way of it going. So I think his reaction might be quite nuanced.
Mm-hmm. It could be really funny, I guess, you know, that he brings her back to make her suffer, you know, because she was bad, and suddenly realizes, no, she wasn't bad. She was protecting us from whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that I think the Constantine that we've seen would obviously be pretty happy, if he even cares.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be that people think he's going to be really kind of happy, but actually he's got bigger problems. He's got fucking demons to deal with. He's got this stuff to deal with. It could be that he doesn't even care one way or the other.
Yeah. So this last one, and I'll let you leave. What is the thing that you haven't done in comics yet that you are like, I need to tell the story before I retire?
By the way, the previous question, the guy who I met in Chile, I have to say, I loved it in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the comics drop in Chile, in Santiago, but Chile itself, boy, I'm looking forward to going back there because it was just so terrific. The story I'd really like to. It's really hard to say because I have to say it's the stories I'm writing now because why not? I mean, like, why not? I mean, these are the stories I want to write now, and they're the ones I'm doing right now. And I've got a number of other projects which we haven't spoken about, some of which I can't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But there are some really interesting stuff I'm writing, and they're the stories I want to write. Really want to write, because why not write it now?
That's amazing. You know, just guys, look forward. I love this answer. This is the stories he's writing now are the ones he's always wanted to tell. So be aware.
Yeah, it's a good time to go now as well because I've got a big sign coming up saying low battery.
Okay, good.
That's
even better. That's even better.
So thank you to everyone. It's been great. And I have to also say, I really do love going to Spanish comic conventions. And I really do love meeting the Spanish readers and fans because they really seem to get my stuff. And I mean to understand my stuff. And so really, this has been really good. And I look forward to the time. I can come in person to Spain again and see some of you guys in person.
I will make it happen. You know that. I
And we
love
can hang out.
I love you. I miss you. Give me a second. Don't cut because I want to say proper goodbye to you after I cut the live feed. To all of you, thank you so much for being here. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow with colorist Alex Sinclair and Marte Gracia. Take care. Wear your mask, and we're off in